ethics. A technically skilled official without integrity is dangerous and can damage the institution profoundly as unqualified one. In our continued fight against corruption, government will intensify lifestyle audit and strengthen consequence management systems across public service. Corruption rarely begins with a single criminal act, Chair. It often begins with interference, manipulation, and compromised decision-making that institutions fail to confront early enough. By institutionalizing the monitoring of integrity risks, government strengthens its ability to identify governance failures before they become systemic crises. We are happy, Chair, to announce that the Central Register for Discipline Cases, discipline management, will now be operational in all spheres of government. For far too long, officials who have been dismissed for misconduct were able to move between departments and other spheres of government without consequence, and that era has to stop. Government will also implement the Public Service Skills Audit Framework to identify capability gaps across departments. We accept that the developed state must understand the strengths and weaknesses of its own workforce. Recruitment, training, and workforce planning must be informed by evidence rather than assumption. So this capable state, Honorable Chair, we speak of in the 21st century must be digitally capable. And Deputy Minister, Honorable Pinky Kekane, will talk about this matter lengthily, including the Employees Housing Scheme and the Center for Public Service Innovation. As we advance our effort in building a capable state, the National School of Government has positioned itself not merely as a training institution. It is the institutional bridge between policy ambition and administrative capability. Since its formation, the NSG has trained more than 600,000 individuals across government. That scale, House Chair, reflects an important truth that capable state is built one competent official at a time. Similarly, professionalization requires continuous learning, and that is why government continues to expand compulsory training programs across all levels in the public service. The extension of nuclear programs, compulsory course in financial management, execution discipline, digital transformation and cybersecurity, and the strengthening of municipal training all reflects a broader principle that governance capability cannot remain voluntarily. The NSG's transition towards accredited qualification and structured learning pathways marks a significant institutional evolution. Public administration must increasingly be treated as a professional ground of competence, ethics, and continued development. Equally important is the NSG's work in embedding constitutional values and ethics across the broader educational pathways. A state that is serious about integrity cannot wait until misconduct occurs before discussing ethics. And ethical leadership must be cultivated long before appointment into public service. House Chair, I also confirm the formalization of the Ministerial Advisory Committee on Curriculum Development and Quality Assurance, comprising 12 local and international experts. It is also my pleasure to announce that Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, the former Deputy President of the country, has been appointed as the chair of this advisory committee. Honorable Chair, we must admit that no reform can succeed without an independent oversight. Throughout this address, there is a common thread, and that is the independent oversight as a fundamental pillar to constitutional democracy. And that is why the Public Service Commission remains central to the accountability architecture of the state and as a constitutional safeguard for ethical governance, professional public administration. In eras when institutional integrity across the department faces severe pressure, the Commission maintained its independence, and that independence requires strong enforcement authority. The PSC bill currently before the NCOP therefore presents one of the most consequential governance reform since the democratic transition. The binding recommendation power will fundamentally strengthen the accountability architecture of government. The Commission's expanded role also in professionalization, recruitment oversight, ethics investigation, and anti-corruption work will deepen the state's ability to defend constitutional governance standard. Of particular significance, Chair, is the PSC's growing focus on consequence management within supply chain management and frontline administration, where governance failures often first emerge. Corruption does not only occur at senior level, it embeds itself within routine administrative processes when institutions fail to enforce standards consistently. The Public Service Commission, therefore, the Public Service Commission's provincial work also deserves recognition because accountability must reach communities directly. Citizens do not encounter the state in theory, but they encounter the state in clinics, schools, municipal offices, and service delivery points. Oversight must therefore be grounded in lived reality and not be confined to reports and boardroom meetings. House Chair, I acknowledge the former Director General of the Office of the Public Service Commission, Advocate Dinky Dube's appointment by President as the Deputy Public Protector. This appointment, Chair, says something very clear, and that is her career is itself a demonstration of what this portfolio builds. A public servant of integrity, promoted on merit, whose capabilities now serve the broader accountability construction of our democracy. We are very proud of that. Honorable members, the state that expects ethical and capable service from its employees must also recognize the responsibility towards their well-being. That responsibility is expressed most directly through the government employees medical scheme. This year, GEMS marks 20 years since it became operational. From its inception, the scheme represented a social compact between the democratic state and the public servants who carry its constitutional obligation.
Honourable Minister, your time is now expired. Thank you.
No, I asked that I will take from my last.
Okay.
You can take from my last minute.
My apologies, I wasn't informed of that, Honourable Minister.
Okay.
You may then continue. We'll
Thank
adjust
you.
your time at the end.
Thank you. Today, the scheme serves nearly 900,000 principal members and more than 2.4 million beneficiaries. In this regard, GEMS remains one of the most important pillars supporting the public servants and their families. I wish Honourable Chair to directly address the matter which has been the subject of discussion in the recent weeks, that of the contribution increase. House Chair, we appreciate the fact that the initial proposed increase of 9.5 would have placed additional strain on workers already managing rising cost of living. Following sustained engagement between government, organized labor, and GEMS leadership, an agreement was reached to reduce the increase to 7.5, giving the employees 2% back into their pocket. In our endeavor to address the challenges that the scheme faces, we are happy to mention that there is also a number of interventions, House Chair, that are already yielding results, which will assist the scheme mitigating such high increases, if all things goes accordingly. The sustained engagement between government and organized labor and GEMS leadership matter a lot as they demonstrate that the social dialogue remains essential in balancing institutional sustainability with the dignity of public servant at the center. At this point, I would like to pause and express my deep gratitude to the leadership demonstrated by the unions. As government, we understand the plight of workers, and it's precisely that reason that we have been able to work closely with them and in good faith. And I want to reaffirm our commitment that we are going to work with them in good faith going forward. The adjustment also provides meaningful relief to public servants while also protecting the long sustainability of the scheme. Sustainability in this regard, I mean that while institutions remain financially viable, but they must also remain human. Even the continued protection of lower income employees through subsidized options remains essential. As South Africa continues discussing on the universal health coverage, the national health insurance, GEMS provide an important evidence that equitable healthcare access at scale is achievable when governance, discipline, and operational capabilities are aligned. House Chair, there is a common thread across the entire portfolio. DPSA establishes government standards, NSG builds capacity, CPSI drives innovation, and GEMS protect the well-being of the employees. And lastly, the Public Service Commission safeguards accountability and integrity. Together, these entities form the internal architecture of the capable state. They also shape whether public institutions remain ethical, professional, and responsive. Honourable House Chair, South Africa's governance challenge has never been the absence of policy ambitions, but the uneven application of the very ambitions. Government institutions are weakened not because the constitution fails, but because governance standards are inconsistently enforced. Accountability becomes dependent on personalities rather than systems. Capabilities become vulnerable to instability and ethics becomes negotiable. Honorable Chair and members, this budget seeks to reverse that trajectory through institutional discipline and through enforceable standards. A capable state is not built in moments of convenience. It is built through sustained ethical leadership, professional administration, and institutional consistency. And South Africa can no longer afford a public service that is politically contested, administratively weak, and ethically uncertain, while facing deep social and socio-economic pressures. This budget vote therefore advances a simple but substantial proportion that the constitutional promise of a capable, ethical, and developmental state must now move from aspiration to reality. 30 years ago, democratic South Africa adopted a constitution founded on dignity, accountability, and responsiveness and openness.